Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Oner podcast, the podcast where we break down and critique movies all in one take. I'm Austin Archer. With me, as always, is my childhood next door neighbor and BFF,
Cramer, England.
What's up, dog?
What's up?
We didn't do an episode last week.
Nope.
I feel like it's been at least 7 days since I spoke to you.
Probably, yeah. 7 days. Yep, that's about right.
Oh boy, it's so spooky in here.
I
tonight.
know.
It's so scary. It's time for scary movie time. Our last episode was Signs, and we're like, we might as well just stay with the PG-13 thrillers and scary movies that we grew up on.
Oh yeah.
And today we're talking about Gore Verbinski's The Ring.
Yep. The Ring.
You didn't accidentally watch Ringu, did you?
No, I didn't. Which, have you ever seen it? I've never seen it.
I've never seen it.
I've heard it's very similar, so
yeah.
I don't know. But yeah, I've never seen that. I did see Ring 2, which was horrible.
Wasn't it called Rings?
No, they did a new one that's called Rings. That was in like 2017.
So there's 3?
Yeah.
Oh no! Was Naomi? Naomi Watts is in Ring 2, isn't she?
She is. Yeah. I do not remember like anything about that movie except for the stupid deer scene. They have a whole bunch of deer that like run into their car and then they just like stare at them. And I just don't. I don't remember anything about it. Not like I remember The Ring.
I don't think I ever saw Ring 2. I literally only thought there was one sequel to this. But I forgot that there was the Ring 2 or is it called Ring 2? I don't know. And then there's Rings, I guess, which is, it's sort of like how the Blair Witch Project went back to just a movie called Blair Witch.
Yeah.
And, or Scream just became Scream again.
Yeah.
How they went Scream 2, Scream 3, Scream 4.
Yeah.
Scream 6.
The naming conventions of sequels these days, and it's so funny. There's so many movies because I guess Rings, it just ignored Ring 2 from the comments. I have not seen it, but like there's so many sequels now that like they just ignore. It's like, hey, you remember those Alien 3 and 4? How nobody liked them? Well, they don't exist anymore. So we're gonna do this new one, Alien Romulus, and it's set between Alien and Aliens. And like, but don't think about those other ones. And there's like all these other movies that are like, just forget about those couple of movies, and we'll just remember these ones that everybody liked. Did
Bryan Singer initiate that by doing Superman Returns and saying?
I feel like he kind of did.
Did he invent the we need to come up with a name for a sequel that pretends the other sequels don't exist. It needs to be called like a forgetquel or something, or
that's a good one. I like that one. Yeah.
A replacequel or
replacequel. Yeah. Forgetquel. Yeah.
Just forget those other movies were made and pretend that this is the second movie.
Yeah, it's weird. It's very weird. But
Halloween did that. They did that reboot recently with the trilogy Halloween Kills or something, or Halloween Ends. But they just pretended that there was never a Halloween 2, and it just went from Halloween to Halloween.
They made it a rumor because in the movie she's like, there was a rumor that went around that that's her brother, but that's not true. And I was like, oh, okay. So did the movie happen or?
Yeah, it's so weird. It's like, did we do this? But yeah, I think I'm fine just pretending that all that exists here is The Ring, because this is a movie that I don't think needs a sequel at all. No. It's pretty wrapped up, and I should maybe watch Ringu, but this was a movie that, like, I think for us, especially as teenagers, especially growing up where we grew up, where like not everybody's allowed to see rated R movies as kids and everything like that. Yeah. There was something about, I think this kind of kicked off an era of like hard hitting, really scary movies that are pushing the line of being PG-13. They're like, what can we get away with in a PG-13? Because there's some pretty gruesome stuff here.
Oh man. And it's the funniest thing, not the funniest thing. I totally agree. The image of the girl in the closet still, like I was like nervous to watch that scene because it is burned into my brain, and like that terrified me for a lot. Like, it was hard for me to sleep with the lights off.
I gotta ask,
after I saw that movie and that scene particularly.
You're absolutely. So I gotta say, it's probably been 15 years since I've watched this movie, maybe longer.
Me too. Yeah.
I think we watched it several times as kids because it was like a thing that we needed to show our friends to see how tough are you? Because it felt like the scariest movie we'd ever seen as kids. I was wondering if coming back to this movie after 15, maybe 20 years, if I would look at it and go, oh, it doesn't really hit the way that I thought it did, or I've seen scarier things now. I don't know what your experience was like rewatching this, but it still got to me. All these years later, it got under my skin. I wasn't like jumping out, but like when it was over, I was like, man, that got to me.
Yeah. I think I kind of had the same experience. Especially the ending. The ending to me still, like, I got chills, like, because I knew it was coming, and the way that it's executed, which we'll talk about more later. But I was like, wow, like, oh my gosh, like, and my wife. So my wife just finished everything she needed to do, so she like laid on me to fall asleep because she usually does, and so she's like, "Your heart is racing," and it was like almost that time, and I was like, "Really? Oh, why? I don't even know why." It was because the ending was coming up, and I was like, "Oh." So it obviously affected me, and my wife found out. I found out she could hear that it was affecting my heart rate. So
I'm in my parents' basement right now because I'm visiting Sandy, and that's why my background is different. But my mother, I was sitting in this room watching it on my laptop, and my mom comes in right at the climax of the movie and pops around the corner and goes, "Ah!" like that, and I screamed. Because I thought I was being pretty chill. I thought I was like, I'm watching the movie and I'm going like, yeah, I like this movie. And she comes around that corner and I screamed.
I can see your mom doing that, which is so funny.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, that's a scary. But yeah, it affected me still. I will say, like, I was able to sleep fine, and it didn't, like, I was thinking about the movie more. It didn't have the effect that it had on me when I was a kid. But it still, I mean, there are those moments that I'm like, oh, that is disturbing. And that's what I think the movie really wants, is like, it wants to disturb you. And it still accomplishes that for me. So
it's got a real vibe to it.
Yes.
They do a lot with atmosphere and with cinematography and lighting and color
and sound.
Yep. It's got a real, there's a real energy to this film. And I do think that, like, this in many ways kind of legitimized that you can have a legitimately scary movie that doesn't need to rely on buckets of gore to get it done, or like lots of shock or body horror. There are little things that you can sort of get away with it in PG-13, like just the image of a nail going through a finger. And it's and that's bad enough. And just seeing it for us and not staying on it, showing it for short enough that you go, was that what I think it was? Mm-hmm. Or, these dead bodies that we talk about, like the girl in the closet, it's so fast that it's a blink and you'll miss it thing. But it's one of those moments that you're like, even seeing that for a second it's almost scarier than if the camera stayed on it longer.
True.
And
it is. And I totally agree. It's not, the gore is like, it's a gross out, and it is effective in some instances for sure. But yeah, you can make scary thing. I mean, when I was younger, The Sixth Sense also, it creeped me out. Like, just seeing dead people, thinking of, like, it uses the lack of gore to its advantage in both of these movies, and it really affected me, and it's scary. So you can definitely make scary movies without all that.
Yeah. So, spoiler warning, if you've never seen The Ring, in effect, I mean, it's over 20 years old. What is this?
Yeah. 2002.
Yeah. So, hey, come on. What are you doing? You've never seen The Ring? Go watch
The Ring.
Go watch The Ring, you baby. What are you, a baby?
Just go watch it. What are you waiting for?
Little baby. What, you think you're gonna get a phone call on your landline right after you watch it?
You're gonna go watch your VHS? You still have a VHS?
Your TV's gonna turn on with the fuzz. It doesn't do that anymore, you baby. Okay?
What would they even do? Okay, what would they do now? They can't make this movie anymore because
you can't remake
VHS.
it.
Like, is it which they already made a movie where a website kills you called fear.com, which no one liked. And so what would they do now? But anyway, it's good that it's kind of stuck in this capsule of time.
I think that the analog thing is part of it. Like
it is,
because if it was a link, if it was like, have you watched the link that kills you? You watch you
link.
Click on the link and it takes and you go to a video, and I think it's the fact that it's like the mystery of like there is a physical piece of media. It is a physical tape, and it's like somebody made this, except we can't trace who made it, and the fact that there's something really about that. And I don't even think it works if it's a DVD. Like there's something about VHS that
and actually on this rewatch, I noticed a lot more on this rewatch. So she has, again, spoiler warning, which we just did, but she has the ability to burn images into things and into people's brains.
I never thought of this.
So she burned her whatever onto the actual tape. It was her. This is in my mind. It never says it, but I mean, that's what makes sense to me is like the time code is off, which they explain why time code is important. But that is what she burned. There's no time code because she burned it onto the tape is what I figured out on this one, or at least what I feel is right on this one.
I think you're right. I think you're spot on, because they make a big meal out of the fact that she had, how did you make these pictures? And they look like something like, old cameras used to literally burn images into a chemical. And that's how, film you're burning, there's a chemical layer on the film that then an image gets burned into it. Mm-hmm. And she makes these transparent images that the doctors are going, how did you make these? And they say it several times that when there's the image of the tree burned into the wall, and they go, oh, it looks like someone carved this in, and she goes, oh, or burned. And I never put two and two together that it's like, it's a videotape because she has this ability to telepathically burn images, and so she created literally an entire tape. But there's also something about the image of like this blank black VHS that has no title on it or label, that's so eerie. Because can you imagine if it was like a laser disc? Like,
it's huge disc.
What's that laser disc over there? And it's like, I don't know.
Why is it all blank? Yeah, it's not as ominous as a VHS tape.
Yeah, there's something about a bunch of VHSs in a case with a title, and then there's one that doesn't have a case and it's blank, and there's something very ominous about that prop.
Yeah, and it really goes into the faults of VHS. It works well into that because, like, you put in a DVD. I mean, this was so weird. I don't know if this was how it was in your. I think this is how most people are. When we hooked up our VHS player, you had to go to channel 3. Yeah, nothing was on channel 3. That's the VHS channel, and it would be the snow. It would be the static, and so you have the static, which they use really effectively in this movie, by the way. And you have the image is never really great on VHS. I mean, it was like, it was the best that they could make at the time, but it would degrade over time, and you get the lines that go through, and, and it all plays into the eeriness of the movie and the actual VHS tape. Yep. So the analog, like you're saying, the analog of it all really works to its advantage. And I feel like 2002, this is on the cusp of when VHSs were going out of style.
They just got it. But I also think that in 2002, that's what made it even more eerie, is that VHS was becoming an obsolete form of media, and everyone was converting to DVD. So it was almost like this thing. It was like this relic left over. What is this? What's this dusty old tape that is sitting on this shelf? And I think if you're going to remake it today, it's still got to be a tape. That's
Yeah.
gotta be, but then what you don't have is, and this was, boy, the late 90s, the 70s to the 90s to the early 2000s made great use of landlines in horror movies, because what a great jump scare sound effect to have silence and then that loud, obnoxious ring echoing through the house. And then
Yeah.
when you lived in a house that where this would happen when you were by yourself growing up,
Oh,
you'd be watching a scary movie, your parents would be out of town, and someone would call the
the
house, and
phone
you would
rings.
jump out of your skin. And it's so much scarier than your cell phone going off. Like, your cell phone with the little buzz
Yeah.
doesn't scare you nearly as much as 4 different phones in the house all simultaneously ringing.
Oh my
And
gosh. And
yeah.
like, it's so true. You brought up memories of things that have happened because, yeah, when you have a landline, I mean, and then you have to run to get to to answer the actual phone.
Yep.
But like, sometimes it'd be in the dark. So
Yeah.
I don't want to run in the dark.
Yeah.
But yeah, that it really uses all those to its advantage. Yeah. And it really was scary. It's scary. Like, there would be times in the middle of the night, the phone would ring and you're like, why is the phone ringing? And immediately, it's scary because nobody should be calling you at 2:00 in the morning. Like, that doesn't make any sense. Anyway, yeah, that's a good extra effect that they used.
Yeah, Scream, When a Stranger Calls, like, there's so many movies that made good use of that landline thing of like, oh,
Yeah.
like the phone starts ringing and it's immediately ominous and immediately scary. And that would happen to you in real life, and you'd be like, it is scary, especially if I'm home alone and I'm watching scary movies and the phone goes off. It's for sure a murderer. It's 100% the devil on the other line, and he's going to kill me. And yeah.
It's instantly scary.
Instantly scary.
But yeah.
Okay, so this movie, we have a classic horror movie cold open, where it's dropping us. It's doing exactly what it needs to do. I always liked, and I remembered from the moment I started it, that the DreamWorks logo does that flash of the ring.
Oh yeah,
And the
yeah.
T. I knew it immediately when I started the movie. I was like, oh yeah, there's a little flash of the ring here.
Yeah.
I will say, starting out as we're getting into the plot, I was really pleased. The same way that we were talking about with Signs, there's a lot of payoff as this movie progresses, as this screenplay progresses. There's a lot of ominous imagery that continuously gets paid off as the movie progresses. It's not just like weird for the sake of being weird. It keeps folding its way into the narrative. And
and all the images that you see on the tape, if not all, then almost all the images get paid off. You see there's the blood in the water, and you see that later, and there's the string coming out of the mouth, and that gets paid off later. So yeah, there's a lot of setup that gets paid off. But unlike Signs is, it all gets paid off at once. This is a gradual payoff, which works really well for the movie.
Mm-hmm. And leading to the final image that gets paid off is the ring. Like, that's the sort of central mystery of like, what is the ring?
Yeah.
And honestly, the answer is like pretty terrifying. Like, the answer of what it is like, oh, that's scary what that is. Okay, so there's 2 girls at home. They're talking about, have you watched the tape have you heard about this tape that kills you when you watch it? Classic horror movie setup. It's also just like stuff that teenagers like to do, just like urban legend stuff. And as this girl is telling her friend about it, her friend's like, oh no, I watched that. But this is interesting that she kind of plays it off like it's a joke when it's not.
I know.
Yeah.
I was kind of like, well, because when I watched it the first time, I was like, oh, well, she didn't watch it. But then I'm like, no, wait, she did. I actually feel like I almost wish they would have done it later. I wish she would have scared her with something else. And then the friend would have brought up, well, have you heard about the tape that kills people? And then she gets really scared, and then they get the call. And then it goes into that. I feel like that might have been a little more effective, but because it makes you think, well, oh, she didn't watch it, but she really did. So it kind of undermines what happened. But
yeah, I think that's stronger. If there's a little boy who cried wolf moment where like she makes up a lie to scare her friend, but then her friend's like, oh, Becca, you suck. Have you ever heard of the tape that you watch? And then she explains the tape, and then Becca's demeanor changes, and it's like, I watched that. And she's like, you're not going to get me again. And she's like, no, I did. I watched that.
Yeah.
And, like that, I don't know, but whatever, nitpicky. They're being girls home alone, having girls night. And they, the phone starts ringing. Again, we have this ominous thing. Her friend answers the phone and hands it off to Becca really ominously, and it turns out it's just like Becca's parents or something, right? Mm-hmm. It's like, yeah. And then her friend goes back upstairs, but this is where the TV kicks on and has the fuzz on it.
Yeah.
And this is, great usage of this, because boy, if you wake up in the middle of the night at a sleepover and the TV's on and has the fuzz on.
Yeah. Again, actually, Kay,
the devil's here. The devil's here.
This is the fun. Okay. I'm just remembering this now. So first of all, we saw this together with a bunch of our friends.
Oh yeah.
And then you remember we went back and had a sleepover at your house.
Oh yeah.
And we went down, like we were all sleeping, and we could not sleep because we were all terrified.
Yeah.
And we were trying to stay awake. Well, this happened. You all fell asleep and I was still awake. I was the last one to fall asleep. And we were in Adam's room. Yeah. I think he was on, I think he was gone at the time, but it was like, we were in Adam's room and I was like, everyone's asleep. And I'm like, oh crap. So I look at the TV and I get freaked out. And then I wake up one of our friends and I'm like, dude, you gotta be awake with me. And he's like, oh, what the heck, man? And then we all woke up again.
Yeah.
And then our one friend got real mad and called his dad and had him come.
Yeah, one of our friends went home. He was like, I gotta get out of here.
He was done. Anyway, I was alone. All of you were asleep, and the TV was right in front of me. And I just kept thinking in my head of what was going to happen. Luckily, it didn't turn on. But anyway, back to the movie. That was just a funny story. That's probably only funny to us. But
I do know that Adam was on his mission when we saw it, because he came home shortly after that. And Adam and I went and saw it together, right? Just me and him.
Oh, you did.
And we came home. And his room was downstairs and my room was upstairs. So we lived in a 3-story house, and I lived upstairs. He lived in the basement, and we both went to bed. And like 15 minutes later, I sort of creep back downstairs, and he's coming up from the basement. He's like, do you want to sleep in the family room together? And I go, yeah. And he's like, yeah, let's just sleep on the couch together. And so Adam and I slept on the couch because we were both too scared to sleep in our bedrooms by ourselves.
It really has an effect.
Yeah.
Now, and so she unplugged. Well, she turns off the TV. Yeah. Then she unplugs the TV and it comes back on, which is that immediately, again, I was getting my heart was racing. I was like, oh my gosh, I remember this. This is so scary. And then you see the weird ripple,
little wave in the TV. Yeah.
Yeah. And she goes upstairs and she sees all this water coming out of her room, and the doorknob is dripping, and she opens the door and the TV is on in her room, and then she starts screaming, and you can see her face distort just a little bit, and then it cuts.
I also think we see a glimpse of a well on the TV.
We do.
The TV is on, and we see a quick glimpse of what's on it. It's a well. I do have questions about where. I think her friend is named Ashley, or is her friend Becca?
I think her friend.
She's Becca. Is she Becca, or is she? I can't remember. Whatever. I don't know where. We know that her friend is there and is traumatized by it.
Her friend is Becca.
Okay, her friend is Becca, and her friend winds up in an insane asylum because she's so traumatized by what she saw. But I'm wondering, in this sequence, where is she? Because she was there with her friend. I just don't know where Becca is in this entire sequence.
Yes, that's what my exact question as well. I forgot that she was in a mental institution. I forgot that whole scene with her.
Yeah.
But I really wonder, what happened?
I have questions about that. There's a few things that this movie does that I was being nitpicky about, going I feel like they're just putting that in to up the eeriness of the overall feel of the film, but I don't know about the internal logic of it in the film. And Becca's one of those things where I'm like, okay, was she there? How much of this did she see? Was she going to the bathroom and she came back from the bathroom and just found her friend dead and was traumatized by that? If so, how come she knows so much about Samara and the rules of the, I have questions about Becca, and I know that it adds to the eeriness, but I'm like, what? I don't know.
I have a lot of questions about that too, because I find it very interesting. I think it's fine that they don't really answer them, but this actually, I do have problems with this movie on this rewatch, because there are a lot of questions, and there's a lot of things that don't really make a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And I mean, thinking back on it though, I'm like, a lot of those things I can just let go because it's just it adds to the mystery or the eeriness of it.
Yeah.
But I think also the other problem that I had with this movie is that like so many movies stole from this movie.
Oh, sure.
And so I see a lot of the tropes, and it made me like, oh, like this they're gonna do this, and there's so many horror movies do that. But I had to remind myself that like this was one of the first ones that did it, or at least one of the first ones that kind of resurrected it in the best way that kind of everybody else copied again.
There was a big stream of copycats after this movie. This movie did so well at the box office that, you had like The Grudge, and you had all of these like kind of ghost movies that came out, these PG-13 ghost movies that became a big thing in the 2000s. And I think this sort of kicked it off, but it was part of this trend of remaking Japanese horror films.
Yeah.
So The Grudge was based on a Japanese, and I think so, we can hand a lot of the atmospheric credit to Japanese cinema for sure, for The Ring and for this sort of era in horror. Pretty much immediately we're introduced to Naomi Watts after this cold open, and we find out pretty much right away that she's got a son who is it's her niece that died, and her son was very close with her. They were very close cousins. This is one of the things in the movie that I, just like Becca, that I have questions about, that it works, because I will say, we talked about this in Signs too, that like this era had so many strong child actor performances.
Yeah.
This little kid is terrifying and still is to this. I am so scared by this little kid, but I also go, why is he like that? We already have one evil kid in the movie, and that's Samara. And I'm totally cool with like not knowing Samara's origins, like where did she come from?
Yeah.
Why is she magic? Why Samara seems to be unkillable. There's nothing you can do to escape the evil power of Samara. But what's with Naomi Watts's kid, and why is he the way that he is? I don't get why, because they seem to be wanting to do a Haley Joel Osment from the Sixth Sense thing with him, where he's kind of clairvoyant and he kind of can see things and he can kind of communicate with spirits. But I'm like, it just seems like a thing that the movie wants to do to just add another layer of eeriness, but I don't know that I get why.
I think from kind of reading people's theories and things like that online, I think that they're making a comparison between Naomi Watts and her son and the mom, Morgan, Samantha Morgan or whatever it is, and Samara. They're both mothers who are drifting apart from their children, and they're
the father wants nothing to do with the child.
Exactly. In both cases. So it's kind of a mirror image in a way. But Samara, we don't know who her actual parents are. Her parents, the Morgans, are her adoptive parents. But so, and this is Naomi Watts' biological child. So I do also wonder, like, why can he talk with her? I mean, she can do all this stuff to all these different people, but why Samara has been communicating with him for a long time.
Yeah. Has been showing. Yeah. And maybe that way. And maybe that's just what it is that in this world, there are, clairvoyant and weird and eerie children. And Naomi Watts happens to have one of them. And I like that. That I buy that. And I don't even just buy it. That makes sense.
Yes.
That helps answer that question for me of like, we are drawing a clear parallel here. And, will Naomi Watts go the same route as
Morgan?
Sarah Morgan or whatever her name was.
Mm-hmm.
Or will she figure out how to love her child despite the fact that her child is a creepy weirdo who talks to dead people? And but it does seem like Samara is significantly more evil than Naomi Watts' kid. But boy, he sure is creepy. He sure is a creepy kid. And anyway, they go to the funeral of his cousin, and he's doing a very Haley Joel Osment from the Sixth Sense thing. He's wandering around and going into bedrooms and trying to feel the energy of the spirits. And this is where Naomi Watts's sister and basically asks her, hey, I need you to figure out what happened because the doctors can't tell me what happened to my daughter. And it doesn't make, and like my daughter looked, the way she died did not look normal at all.
Yeah.
And
her heart just stopped.
And also she looked like,
she looked like she drowned.
Yep. She looked like someone who had been decaying underwater for decades, or maybe, for months.
Yeah.
And she goes outside and she starts talking to the teenagers and asking them. And Adam Brody's got a nice little creepy scene here, a little cameo from Adam Brody.
It's actually really funny because we just, me and my wife just finished Nobody Wants This.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, look, hey, it's the hot rabbi. And my wife's like, who is that? I don't know who that is. And I said, it's a hot rabbi. She's like, oh my gosh, he's so young. Anyway, so funny to see him. He plays a very small part, but a very...
It's because of the tape. The tape that killed. Yeah.
Very moody
part. He knows, all these kids know about the tape, but he kind of turns her on to the fact that like, there's this tape that kills you, and everybody that he knows that's seen it is dead. And it's like a real thing that is getting to these kids. So Naomi Watts figures out where her niece saw this with her boyfriend and her friends, and she decides to try to go track down this tape. She works for like a newspaper or something.
Yeah. And one thing she does, so she finds a camera, she finds a disposable camera, film camera, and she develops the pictures, and she sees all the pictures up until they watch. So all the pictures are totally normal up until after they watch the tape, and their faces are all distorted as if they're underwater. Like
and this is again Samara being able to somehow telepathically control film and being able to manipulate the image on film and change.
Exactly.
So once you are possessed by Samara, she will do all manner of. For some reason, her X-Men superpower is manipulating film. And
and actually, okay, two things. Well, first of all, so she sees those, and she sees the cabin that they go to. Now, it's funny you bring up X-Men because in the same year X2 came out, I think it was 2002. X2 came out, which also had Brian Cox, who had a son who would put images in their head, and his wife committed suicide.
Boy,
suicide is not funny. The parallel of the fact that he plays two characters that are almost exactly the same is very interesting. I thought there's no connection to it. I just thought, oh, this is just X2.
Yeah.
All right, cool. Like, he's the same character. This is Stryker.
Wow. Interesting. He did that almost exact same thing twice. Anyway, she goes to this cabin that she finds on the roll of film. She asks the guy who works there, hey, do you remember these kids that came in? He goes, yeah, I remember. They stayed in cabin 12. And then he goes, if you want to take a nap, there's some, she says, I'm going to take a nap because I got a long drive home. Maybe I'll stay in cabin 12. He points her in that, hey, we got VHSs there if you want to watch something. And she sees the ominous blank black tape. It would have been funny if she just put it on and it was just sort of like somebody had just like recorded an episode of Barney or something.
I know. This is actually, there's a lot of things that could be parodied in this movie, which they did in Scary Movie 3. Yeah. And I couldn't stop thinking about that. But yes, that would be very, it would be very funny.
But obviously she goes and she puts the tape in, and we, the audience, along with her, get to watch the infamous death tape. And I remember seeing this as a kid, and like, it definitely disturbed me more as a kid. Now I do have more of the reaction that her baby daddy has, which is like, it just sort of looks like a edgy student film. Like it looks like an edgy art film. It's not as when I was a kid, there's all this imagery, like a giant centipede that crawls out from under a chair, this ladder that's sort of going to nowhere. And this ominous image of an old man looking out a window, and a woman falling to her death off of a cliff, and these a comb going through hair, and the nail going through a fingernail, like
the eye of the horse, and the bunch of blood in the water,
dead horses on a beach. Lots of definitely disturbing imagery. And if you put yourself in the place of a person who just found a blank VHS and put it in, and that's what it was, and you were watching it in a cabin in the woods by yourself, you would be beside yourself with terror.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
You would be
terrifying.
absolutely horrified by it. And the first time I saw it, I definitely was disturbed by it. And I think that they do a good job with this tape of making it appropriately like, yeah, that's not a pleasant thing to watch. And the sound design of the tape, the weird sound that's going on the entire time the tape plays, that you hear when other people are watching it in other rooms later on in the film. There's this weird, almost, that's another thing about this movie that we didn't, is like Hans Zimmer did the score.
Yeah, he did.
And when the music started playing early on in the film, I was like, I remember this score.
Yeah,
I remember this. It had a really memorable melody. And then finding out that
it is very, and there's so many things about this movie, like you were talking about, the cinematography, the score, and the sound design. And those are the things that make it even better, that put it in a different class, because the score just is very much in line with the tone of the movie. And it sets it's not heavy handed, which Hans Zimmer, not that he could be heavy handed, but he does very well with fitting the mood of any movie that he scores. And this really fit the mood, and it just kind of is off-putting, but in a good way, in a really good way.
Bojan Bazelli was the director of photography, and it is a very well shot movie. It's really, it's not only it's shot really elegantly, but also there's a real atmosphere to it.
Yes.
Yeah.
It was all shot on film, and I think I don't think they used any. I'm sure they used some digital stuff, but it was all kind of, they achieved the look of the film through filters and things like that. So it was really more cut in camera rather than added in post, which makes, there's a different feel. Like immediately you see that there's just kind of something not off about the picture, but the mood of the film again goes into how it looks.
And I think that I haven't seen either of these, but I think I did see The Ring too, and I just completely deleted it from my brain. But I think that like immediately the things that are different are that it doesn't have that same feel in the cinematography, and like it's like digital in both sequels, and it just doesn't have the same kind of tactile. And I think that that's smart that they did the effects that way, because it has the same feeling of this tape that Samara made with her brain powers. Anyway, Naomi Watts watches this video in this cabin. Immediately, of course, the phone rings. She picks up the phone, and 7 days is on the other line, and she's told the clock is ticking and you're gonna be dead in 7 days. And now we're off to the races in the film, and we are into she's got 7 days to figure out what this is, if it can be stopped, if it's real, if it can be stopped. And basically from here on out, it's just her trying to figure out the origins of this tape, while pretty much every day she runs into an image from the tape. She's almost being haunted by the images from the tape. I think the most visceral one is probably her pulling the hair out of her throat. What is
hair, or was it? I think it's
like an electrode
monitor.
That would have been attached to Samara when she was in the hospital, right? Yeah. Like that's what that's a reference to, correct?
Yes, correct. Yeah. When she was in the mental institution or whatever. And I think they used it was more like string, that they would. So it does look like hair. It's not like a string that we would have, or it's not like a cord that we would kind of have that's wrapped in plastic. It was like
because it kind of looks like if you're pulling like a long piece of hair out of a drain is the look that it has. But
it does.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it was meant to look like that, because Samara's hair is always over her face, and it's all long. So I think it's kind of supposed to elicit that feeling of her pulling hair out of her mouth.
Yeah, this is what they do a really nice job of throughout this film is finding interesting ways to bring because everything when you first watch the tape is it's just a collection of random images. But as they continue to show up in interesting and kind of haunting and scary ways, the tape starts to become, but also they're not just random. It's like, at one point she walks out of a building and there's the ladder, but it's leaning up against the building, and that could be random. And it turns out it's just a painter that's using it. But then it's not till later in the film we find out the ladder has an actual purpose. It was the ladder that was in the barn that went to her room. Her parents kept her in the barn.
Yeah.
And
also the chair where she would sit and watch TV was also there. So the chair has meaning. It all kind of has a dual meaning.
The horses, there was this whole thing where the horses on the island where she lived with her parents started going insane because she was her evil presence was driving the horses insane, and they were killing themselves and running into the ocean and drowning themselves.
Yeah. Well, and I think she was doing that because she felt like her parents loved her horses more than her. So she was kind of like,
yeah, you're right.
You go.
You're so much better at I'm watching this through the lens of me at 14, just going, oh, it's all just, you're so right. That's exactly what that is. That's
So she made him go crazy.
She's killing the horses because she feels like her parents love the horses more than her. Yeah.
All it is. All the images they're all very weird and creepy, but they do all connect later. I'm trying to remember what the first one, even I think the ladder is the first one that she sees, because she goes and she makes a copy of the tape. First thing that she does, and then she goes and gives it to her. I guess he wasn't her husband, but it was her old boyfriend.
Her baby daddy.
Yep. Noah. He's an interesting character. I think the actor, what's his name? Martin Henderson. I think he's a good choice. He plays it well. But this was the interesting thing too. She has him come over, right? And he runs into his son, like they run into each other outside, and the son kind of looks up at him, and they just like stare at each other for a second, and then they just like walk past each other. Which at this point in the movie, we don't know that that's his dad. But I don't even know if he knows. But it's an interesting dynamic that they play with throughout the movie. But then he kind of gets it, watches it. He's like, oh yeah, it's not that, it's very film school, like nothing very good. He doesn't really believe in it.
He's watching it in the middle of the day, with all the lights on, with another person in the room, and it's so different from the way that she watched it at sunset in a cabin in the woods by herself,
burning tree,
and you can see how if someone just showed you that video, if someone was like, watch this, and you were with somebody, you'd kind of go, it looks like somebody's doing like an edgy, experimental art film or something. I don't know. It wouldn't, but the phone does ring. I don't think that they answer it for him.
They don't answer it. Yeah. He's like, okay, what's going on? And he doesn't, he's like, make a copy for me. So then she goes and makes a copy, and because
also there's this, she's trying to convince him that something weird is going on because she's been taking pictures of herself all day long with her digital camera. That's right. Samara can even affect digital cameras.
Yes, she can.
Yeah,
she can. I think she can. I mean, she can also affect. She burns her hand into Naomi Watts' arm on, later in the movie. So I think she can do it to anything. But I think that the face being distorted in some sort of digital or analog video is just kind of like, that's the curse in my mind, I guess.
Sure.
It's like I was with them for whatever. So when you see them, you can see them, but whenever it's translated through some medium, it's distorted.
I was always very creeped out by it growing up, by the images, with the way people's faces looked.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. It actually, I was reminded of Scary Movie 3 when like they're like, look at his face, and they're like, oh no, that's just Roger, and he's over there and his face is all weird.
It just looks like that. Yeah.
Anyway, I probably shouldn't remember all that, but it was pretty. It's used very effectively, and it is. And later on, Noah is in the grocery store or some convenience store, and he's buying something, and he looks up in the live view of the cameras that they have, and his face is distorted, and he's like looking at it and like trying to move it, and that's when he realizes that this is true, like this is real, because he goes and takes pictures of his face. And I thought that was used pretty. I thought it was a pretty cool scene. Like, oh man, what would you do if you saw that? So
yeah, and he calls her on the phone and he says, "Hey, I think I believe you." Because, and then the camera pans over, and this is nice visual storytelling. The camera just pans over to the passenger seat next to him, and there's just a bunch of photos that he's taken, Polaroids and different photos that he's developed, where his face is all distorted, and so he realizes, okay, there's something going on, and now they're in it together. They're both in it.
And he's a photographer, I think, or some sort of media guy, because I think he's a photographer. So he took a bunch of pictures. So, and also the fact she's wondering what is going on, and you can tell in the tape, you can kind of move the tracking over a little bit so you can see more of the image. And this is what she moves the tracking over so much, and she finds a lighthouse that leads her to the Morgans.
Well, and also they were working on this together, and they kind of made the tape not work anymore because they were fighting. But he explains to her in that scene, there's no time code on the tape. So when you put it into the VCR, normally you can, it starts counting. It gives you a time, but he's like, this time signature is assigned to the film at the same. So it's built into the tape. And he goes, so this is like being born without fingerprints. It's almost like this tape did not have a maker. And so, cause when you put this VHS into a VCR, no time code comes up. It just kind of comes up jumbled. And, so he explains that to her, and
I thought that was interesting too. Just going the fact that Samara, we don't know who her parents are. I know this is kind of weird. Maybe this is a stretch, but we don't know who her parents are. And just like the tape is like, oh, it's like somebody who doesn't have fingerprints. Like it's not really there. Like, who is Samara? Who are her parents? Like, how did she get these powers? Which is fine that they don't answer the question, but it leads to the mystery of it.
Yeah, I'm more than fine with the movie not feeling obligated to answer that question, and just saying like Samara's like the devil, like she's just evil, like
that's kind of what I was like, well, she must be the daughter of the devil or something.
But and we don't ever get, and not knowing to me is scarier. But
well, and that's I guess that's what I think the Ring 2 and Rings actually goes into her parentage, which I'm like, well, I'm not really interested in that.
No, exactly. Like, this is the problem with like so many horror sequels is they did this once with Michael Myers, and that's why they had to go back and go just reboot, because they did a whole thing where they tried to say like the reason why Michael Myers is so hard to kill and the reason why he's evil incarnate is because there's this cult that it's the movie called, it's like Halloween 6, The Curse of Michael Myers or something. I can't remember which one it is, but it has Paul Rudd in it. And it's a really bad movie, but they try to over explain why Michael is the way that he is, but it's better when Michael's just this weird anomaly where you're like, how come Michael Myers is so hard to kill? How kind of impossible to kill? Like, what is it about what's going on with this guy? And the answer, not knowing, is better. But it's just
I think there are certain things, especially this with her parentage, however she came about, it's better just leaving that up to your imagination. Now, there are certain things that, it is better to give an answer or imply an answer, but this is one that I'm totally fine not knowing. You don't have to go into that, because then it just makes it, when you give it an answer, it makes it dumb in many ways.
Yeah, so Naomi Watts, she finds this lighthouse. She cross-references it in the library and figures out where it is, which island it is, and she heads out to the island to go. She also finds a bunch of stories about horses, killing themselves and all this ominous. So she's got a pretty good feeling that like this Morgan family that she's seeing in these stories on this island, that that's probably the direction to head. And she goes out. She's on this boat that's like a ferry that takes you out to the island, and there's a horse.
Horse freaks out. It like bursts out of its cage or
trailer.
Trailer, thank you. And it starts freaking out, running around, and then it runs, and Naomi Watts is like trying to calm it down, but it like runs at her. It jumps over the edge and and hits the side of the boat, falls in the water, and then it gets sucked under in the propellers, and then you see the blood in the water from the tape.
Yeah, and that's it's an image from the tape where there's just this bloody water pulsating out, and that is a disturbing image, like a horse jumping off the side of a boat to its death, and watching the horse flail in the water next to the boat. Watching it, I was like, that's disturbing. Watching an animal like that, especially a horse, because I don't know, like we humans have it's like watching a dog do that. Like it's like we care a lot about horses.
Yeah. Horses have a connection. They have a deep connection with a lot of humans, right? So it is it's kind of playing off of that. Like, it's, horses can kind of connect with humans, and this is not connecting. It's connecting in an evil way. It wants to get away. So,
well, and it also just shows that like whatever Samara, her influence is, it's still in the world.
Yeah.
Naomi Watts gets to the island. She goes to the Morgan house. She meets Brian Cox, who is the father. She kind of sees on the property. She sees the window in the house where the image of the father kind of looking out disapprovingly out of his window. She goes and sees Brian Cox. He's working with his horses.
Or no, he's just working. He doesn't have any horses anymore.
Oh, he doesn't have any horses anymore. He's working on the farm. Yeah. And they go into the house. There's this nice kind of thing of him like following her around with the hook that he's been using for his, the hook that you would use to grab hay bales. He's got that, and he's very he's a scary character. Yeah.
He doesn't seem friendly.
Yeah.
And I mean, at first he's kind of like, well, what do you want to know? And then like, as she continues to ask questions about his daughter, and he's like, I don't have a daughter, and all that. He starts, it's almost like he's going to come at her with a hook.
Yeah. Okay. So she gets out of there. And she, I think the next stop is the asylum to see Becca.
No,
or is the next thing that happens that her son watches the tape?
Actually, I think Becca was before this.
Okay, well,
she's like, she tells her like, you have 4 days. Which again, I'm like, what is this connection to?
I know. Why does Becca suddenly know the time? How does Becca know that Naomi Watts A, watched the tape, and B, how does she know the day?
Honestly, it is. This one is where the questions are like. I feel like these are questions that probably should be answered. Or I actually would, if there was a sequel, I would actually be more interested in what happened to Becca on that night and what's happened to her since then. Like, going to that, like, Samara's obviously got something with her. So what is it? And I would actually like to see that. But this is kind of like, okay, this is raising too many questions that I don't get, and I can't infer anything. So I feel like you almost could have just taken it out.
But also, maybe it's just another one of those things that you have to just take it on like, this Samara girl, she's really evil and she's really powerful. Yeah. And if you are in the sphere of her doing her evil stuff, you're going to get Samara, and Becca got Samara like to a certain extent. So now Becca's got a little bit of and that's like Becca can't go back to normal life after that. She's got a little bit of the Samara evil spirit imprinted into her. And so now she, we can come up with whatever reason. When does little boy watch the tape? Because
sheesh.
At some point.
I know. I think it actually, I think she goes to honestly, I think it happens before this. Like she, I think it happens before, because he watches it. She's freaked out. She's very scared. And this is actually, it's at the midpoint, because he watches the tape. That's what kind of, the midpoint is when you really kind of like, something big has to happen at the midpoint, and the story kind of takes a new direction. So this one is where he watches the tape. So now she's not only worrying about herself, she's worrying about her child.
Right. And this is what, I think the audience already infers this, but she calls Noah on the phone and she says, he watched the tape, and he says, who? And she says, our son. Yeah. And that's the first time that the movie tells the audience that, even though I think that we're already there at that point, but we
are, but it is. I mean, it does, so So at the midpoint, that's where that all happens.
Now the stakes are higher because it's not just
Yes.
her trying to save her own life.
Yes.
Or save Noah's life. It's the two of them working together to try to save their son.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it, like you said, it raises the stakes, but then this goes into the theme of the movie in many ways, where she is being brought closer to her son.
Mm-hmm.
You know, her son doesn't even call her mom. She calls her by Rachel by her first name. And so at this point, you know, it's bringing her closer. She's realizing she's got to do something for her son. She has to save him. So I think that all happens before they go, because I think she only has like one day left when she goes to the island, and
it really is interesting, actually, knowing now that like the parallels between the son and Samara, because it almost feels like Rachel, Naomi Watts' character, resents her son because she had this relationship with Noah, and Noah basically backed out because he didn't want to be a dad. So it's almost like she kind of like blames this weird kid that she's got who draws weird pictures for the fact that like, hey, I had a good thing going with this guy, and then he didn't want to be around because of you, and now I'm stuck with you by myself. And Noah and then her son feels that. He feels that A, my dad doesn't want to be a part of my life, and B, my mom feels kind of stuck with me, and that's why he doesn't even call, you know. And there's this really interesting parallel of like Samara being like, I don't know why these people brought me here. I didn't ask to be brought, you know. My mom seems to resent me because I'm creating problems in her relationship with her husband, and my dad doesn't even seem to want me. There's really interesting parallels there.
Yeah, there's a lot of interesting, and it makes the story a lot more layered, which is good.
Yeah, Noah even talks about, there's a scene with Noah and the kid where, you know, they're in the car and the kid's like, is there a reason why you don't want to be around more? And he's like, I guess I just, you know, I didn't like my dad, and I never really wanted to be a dad. I never thought I'd be any good at it. And it sort of feels that way because Brian Cox has a line later where he says, my wife was not supposed to have children.
Yeah.
Like, you know, like this guy who's just like, maybe his wife always wanted a kid, but he didn't, you know? And yeah.
It's very much a mirror to their relationship in many, many ways. So that is a good scene. They're talking, but yeah, I think when she goes to the island, Noah goes to the mental institution and tries to find a tape of Samara, and it was taken by Brian Cox's character before. But then so Naomi Watts goes to the doctor on the island, and the doctor was like, there was something wrong with Samara. Like, we don't know who her parents were. She was different, just like I think it is her grandson. He seems to have a mental disability as well. And she kind of tells her like there was something wrong with Samara, and we couldn't do anything to help her. So then Naomi Watts goes back to Brian Cox's house, and this was a weird creepy scene. I don't know. She like watches the tape, and Samara does not sleep. She doesn't sleep. She just stares at the camera, and you see the clock winding because of, you know, like a time lapse.
It's kind of these videos of Samara when she was institutionalized by her parents. And yeah, she never sleeps. And in her interviews, she expresses to the doctor that he asks her, how did you make these pictures? She doesn't really answer, but he says, you know, I know you don't want to hurt people, but she goes, no, but I do want to hurt people. And, you know, I'm sorry, but I do. Yeah. And she kind of expresses that she's got this evil intent, and the doctor's like, well, we're going to help you, you know? And,
yeah. And she's watching it. And then in the background, they keep showing a shot of her, and the lighthouse is kind of like lighting up the room a little bit. And then at a certain point, they shoot back to her, and then Brian Cox is behind her.
Yep.
And it's pretty scary.
He sort of attacks her. He hits her.
Yeah.
But then he just kind of, I thought this was interesting. It's like, why even bother hitting her if you're just going to go upstairs and kill yourself? But that's basically what happens. Is it's a scary scene because he's all of a sudden just there.
Yeah.
And I think he hits her because he's just mad at her for.
Yeah. I think it's just bringing it back up.
Yeah.
And this is one, I think it's fine they don't answer this question, but I wonder, like, does he know what the tape is? Like, does he, because she asked him, do you know about this tape? And he's like, he kind of like gives her like a non-answer. But like, does
Yeah.
he know about the tape, or is he thinking about the institutional tape? Like
Yeah, because it could be either tape. And that I thought I had that same question. Like, is he aware that his daughter made this tape that kills people?
Yeah.
Or yeah.
Yeah, like what is it? Or did I don't know. I think it's fine. We don't know, but he does. I mean, he's got all this stuff. He's got this whole TV set up in his bathroom, and he kills himself by turning on the electricity. And there's all this water again, kind of the
He puts a horse bridle in his mouth too, which is a pretty cool.
yeah
That's so the horse bridle is connected. There's like jumper cables connected to the metal horse bridle, and he puts that in his mouth and turns on the power, and that's a pretty wild. But again, being PG-13, they don't show this. A rated R movie would show it, and they don't show it, and I don't think they need to, because your brain could just knowing that he's putting it. It's pretty powerful imagery.
Yeah. And she gets he kills himself. She walks back, and they end up back at the or actually no, they go to the barn, and
Noah and Rachel go to the barn, and they find the ladder in there.
They find the ladder, they find the chair with the TV, they find behind the wallpaper she has burned in an image of the tree that's outside the cabin where she watched the tape initially. And it's like, it looks like it's on fire. And it was literally burned into the wood. And then they're like, okay, well, we got to go back to the cabin. They go back to the cabin. This this is a little weird to me. Why did they build a cabin over the well, like specifically like that? I
don't know. And it does. It sort of raises the question of like, how long has Samara been dead? How long has it been since? Because boy, like the way that her mom dresses looks like she's a woman from the 1800s.
Oh yeah,
it's weird, because then Brian Cox, it's like he's not that old. Like he's maybe like, I don't know, 70 when he kills, or 60s.
I think it said like 78.
Yeah, but boy,
like in the 70s, but they look way older than that. The way they dress.
Yeah. And the fact that like they're out in the woods next to a well feels very like 1700s, 1800s. Doesn't feel like 1970s. But
I remember watching that the first time. Like, wait, wasn't she like in the 1800s? She looks like she's dressed like they used to. But
what we find out, Noah and Rachel go to this cabin. They're looking for anything that can give them any kind of clue. They can't find anything. They find out, there is a well underneath the cabin. And we get a little flashback here of what happened to Samara. And it seems like this is a property that her parent, that the Morgans used to own. Because there's the horses out in the distance. They're running and they're playing.
She was probably spent time there. And that's,
maybe it was like a summer property of theirs or something.
Well, it's not too far away, but maybe just. And I kind of thought like, oh, well, did Mr. Morgan build the cabin over that, and then they just built more?
Maybe. But it feels like the property has been sold since Samara died, and it was sold to somebody who wanted, because now it's like a hotel kind of with a bunch of different, and they built over this. But her mom basically, they got her out of the hospital. They got Samara out of the hospital. They took her out to wherever this was, this like vacation property.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, so like you said, they chop open the floor and they see the well. Yeah. And then they're like, they open it and they're like, how far down is it? They drop like a rock down and they just don't really hear it. And then you see like all the nails and screws coming up. And then the TV comes and hits Naomi Watts, and she falls in the well.
Again, this is so fun. The way that they tie that it's the nails coming up, which is another image from the from the video. The nails coming up and undoing the floorboards so that the floorboards tilt down and the TV slides down the floorboards into Naomi Watts. And again, it's the TV.
Yeah, TV.
It's like this image it's like the only friend that Samara had was
and the TV turns on. The TV's on when it hits her.
It's got the fuzz on it.
Yeah.
And it hits her and she falls into the well. And now I think we go into
she grabs her arm, I think at this point, or she gives her the image, and she has this vision of Samara in that field looking at that tree, and then the
standing
mom
in front of the well.
Yeah, the mom comes up behind her and says something like, I want you to know that all I ever wanted was you.
Yeah.
And then she puts a bag over her head and strangles her and then pushes her down the well, but she didn't really kill her.
Yeah.
She fell into the well and she stayed there for 7 days. They ultimately say,
Yeah,
she
which
could
is what they
survive with
that's
7
why
days.
and again, like, it's not just an arbitrary thing, 'cause
Yeah.
it could just be this thing of, like, you watch this tape and then somebody tells you you have 7 days, and you can ask that question, "Why 7 days?" And I think it's smart that this screenplay says, because that's how long she
Yeah.
lived in the well, and when we find out that Samara was alive in the bottom of the well, we find out what the ring is, which is when they put a seal over the well that she was in, she could
Yes.
see this ring of light at the top
Yep.
of the well, and that's all she could see, and it's like, boy, what a haunting image.
Oh,
And she
yeah.
was looking up, slowly dying,
Yeah.
looking at this ring of light from the top of this well that her mother dropped her into.
Yeah.
Boy, that is a strong payoff
It
for
is.
the title of the film being The Ring, and that
Yeah.
being the biggest image of
Yeah.
the tape. And then finding out, why 7 days? Because that's how long she looked at the ring in the bottom of
Yeah.
this well.
Well,
Great, yeah.
and the once she's in there, she's kind of freaking out because her time is coming to, it's almost been 7 days. That's why she's
Uh-huh.
freaking out. But she puts her hands in the water and she sees this big clump of hair,
Yeah.
which is like really terrifying. And then she grabs her and she sees all that. She
Yeah.
sees the vision.
But
And
then
then
she
she's
pulls the
like,
body out of the
she pulls the
water.
body out of the water and she's perfectly preserved. And then she like decomposes immediately into a skeleton, which I was like, those aren't the best visual effects,
Not
but
the best effects, but it's
whatever.
2002. We'll give 'em a break.
Yeah, yeah, we'll give him a
Give 'em
break.
a break.
But and then she's like, "Oh, you think like, oh, okay, she's okay, like she's."
The feeling is the reason why Naomi Watts is not dead, even though her time is up. It's past her 7-day mark and she's not dead. And the feeling is, and this seems to make like this is why the ending of this movie is so great, is
Oh
what
yeah,
we've learned as the movie rules have taught us is like, oh, all this girl needed was for someone to come and find her body
yeah,
and set her free.
set her
She's
free.
been locked in this well and tortured, and she's been lashing out because her parents hated her. But now that this nice woman has found her, has gone through the work to find her, and has freed her soul, we're so many haunting movies. It's all about like, we need to figure out a way to, the Sixth Sense. We got to help these people pass on. We've got to
Yeah,
help. And
yeah,
this feels like she's all Samara needed was for someone to find her
yeah, to
and
help her. That's
and
all
to
she
help
really
her out.
wanted.
And so now that Naomi Watts, now that Rachel and Noah have helped her out, no one will ever be harmed by Samara ever again. And it feels like we've wrapped, and they could have ended the movie there, and you'd go,
Yeah,
okay, cool.
you would have been
And
total. I remember feeling like, okay, I'm totally satisfied. This
and
is
I
great.
think
Like when I saw it initially.
and you're kind of relieved as an audience member
Yeah,
because the
you are.
movie's so tense and so eerie that you're like, okay, cool. We found the little girl and now everything's okay.
Yeah,
And and this is it gives me chills thinking about it. And it scared the crap out of me last night because
yep,
basically what happens is the police, the authorities come out to collect the body, and Noah and Rachel realize that they've done it. They're safe. They go home. Rachel sleeps with her little boy, and in the morning she lets her
yep.
little boy know, don't worry, it's okay. We helped Samara. We let her out. And
We set her free.
and the kid sits up in bed and looks at his mom with his eyes are so scary and his nose starts to bleed. And he goes, why did you do that? Why
Yeah,
did you help her? And he goes,
yeah.
and I get chills.
I get chills too. I'm getting chills right now because I was like, before it even happened, I was like, oh man, and it has the same impact. It has the same impact as when I watched it.
Yeah.
And it was like when I initially watched it, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is so crazy. And he's because he is like, he's been communicating with her, and you think, oh, all's well in the world, and then he's like, why would you do that?
Yeah, you think he's gonna be like, thanks for helping my friend. Like he's like,
it's so crazy because he takes the side of Brian Cox.
yeah,
Brian Cox has been saying this whole time, I don't have a daughter. Like this was evil. He's basically saying like she was something that no one should have.
yeah.
And then the son is like, he was right. He doesn't say that, but he says, why did you help her? She does not sleep. Like she was going to do this forever.
Yeah, you're never going to stop her doing this. Like you let her out. And then we cut to Noah's apartment, and boy, oh boy, does his TV ever turn on, and is it ever fuzzy on the TV? And we know exactly what's coming. And we get a fantastic payoff of it, because like the whole movie we've been wondering, what does it actually look like when the 7 days are up and Samara takes her, and we get to see it. And I like how Gore Verbinski and the edit, how they take their time with this, that it's not just a quick jump scare like it is at the beginning of the movie, that they make you sit in it. They Noah sit down and watch Samara slowly crawl out of the well and walk toward the screen of the TV, and then climb out of the TV slowly and slowly menacingly walk. Oh my gosh. It's like a full minute and a half of watching her.
Well, and he's like, she's climbing out and she gets out of the well, and then she comes closer to the screen. And then she climbs out of the screen, and he's just paralyzed with fear. And then she gets out of the screen.
Comes out first. It's great.
And then she stands there, and he's sitting there, and then she moves up right in front of him, and he falls back into his whole of his equipment, and he's bleeding, and he's like trying to crawl away. And then she lifts up that famous image of her face, and she just looks like she's real mad. And she kills him. She kills Noah. This whole time, Naomi Watts is racing to his apartment.
Yeah. And she's calling him, and he's not
calling him, and she's weaving in and out of traffic. She goes up, and I thought this was really interesting too, because she sees him in a chair. She turns him around, and we do not see him at this point. She just screams as loud as she can. Mm-hmm. And you could tell I was like, oh, that's scary. What does he look like?
And the TV's on still on the fuzz, and he's in a puddle of water sitting in a chair. And so, but I will say, hey, Naomi Watts, what are you doing just letting his girlfriend go?
That's what I thought.
She watches
his jerk.
Yeah, she watches his girlfriend get in the elevator, and I'm like, hey, stop her. Be like, don't go up there. Don't go up there. You don't want to see what's up there. But she just lets her go up there. And I'm like, oh, you're just going to let her walk in on the worst thing in the world?
Yeah, okay. That's going to scar her. What is it like?
Yeah.
I was like, wow, you're being a real jerk right now.
Naomi Watts is like, I had to see it, so do you. And it's like, no, just call the police and say there's a dead body in the apartment. Don't make anyone else look at that, whose job it is not to, especially not someone who loves him. Don't make his girlfriend look at that.
It's horrible. It's horrible. But then at this point, she realizes, well, why did this happen? She realizes, oh, I made a copy. Mm-hmm. Since she made a copy of the tape and showed it to someone.
It's not that Samara wanted to be released from the well. It's that Samara wants you to help her get more victims.
Her story.
She wants you to and that's the scariest thing about the end of this movie, is the kid's like, well, what's going to happen to the next person that watches it? And they're just like, not our problem. She doesn't answer.
Yeah. She just, and it ends.
And it's sort of like, in order to stay alive, you got to pass it on.
Yeah. And it's kind of, and again, in reading about this, it's very interesting, because it's like, tragedy and hate is kind of like a virus. It's kind of like an infection. All she wants is to pass it on. And that's kind of what happens. Like, you can't really get rid of it. It just passes from one person to another. And it is a very gloomy ending. It's very, just like you said, he's like, well, what happens to the person who sees it? And it just stays on Naomi Watts for a while. And you're just kind of like waiting for an answer. And she just kind of sits there, and then it ends. And it's like,
maybe, making a copy is like making a vaccine or something, because you have to like do a copy of the virus that you're trying to inoculate yourself against or something. I don't know.
Well, and it's interesting too, because at the end of this movie, Naomi Watts, she chooses her son over the Morgan, Anna Morgan, I think, or whoever it is. The mom chose to kill Samara, which she did. And in this, Naomi Watts chooses to save her son. But in order to do so, she has to kill somebody else. And so it raises that question, like, well, what would you do?
Yeah,
she's got your child.
Oh, man. Like, she's got to let that take. The fact that the ending of this movie is there's no way to stop what Samara is doing. She's going to keep doing it. And you've got to save yourself and save your son. and just know that this evil of Samara is going to continue to spread.
Right.
And, you know,
Yep.
yeah, it's a pretty solid, and that's the right ending for a horror movie. It
Yeah.
wouldn't quite have the same. I think the reason why this movie gets under your skin and stays with you is because of that ending.
Oh, totally.
I think if the movie ended where they let the little girl out of the well and
Yep.
they let her pass on peacefully, it wouldn't stay under your skin the same way. It's that
No.
little kid sitting up in bed and looking at his mom and going, "You did what?" And
Why did you do that?
And the audience realizing, oh no, and realizing, no, there's no fixing this. There's just maybe getting around it through a loophole and spreading it to someone else. And that's the thing that sticks with you. And when you turn the movie off and you go, oh my gosh, like, oh no.
It really does. Like, it makes it has a really, this is a really great ending to a movie. Like, it's pretty good. But anyway, it was, a lot of interesting stuff in this. So.
Yep. Should we get to scores?
Yeah, let's do the scores.
All right, everybody. Our scoring system, if you're new to the show, we do a technical rating, which is just everything from cinematography to acting to the musical score to just the craft of the assembly of the film. We do a score for the ending of the film, how well they stuck the ending. We do a score for rewatchability, a score for cultural relevance, and a subjective score, how much we just personally enjoy the film aside from all of that stuff. So technical rating, what are you giving The Ring?
I gave it a 7.5. And maybe I should give it more, but like,
I give it an 8. Yeah,
you gave it an 8. Yeah,
right there. Yeah,
honestly, I should give it an 8. I gave it an 8 initially, and then I changed it. I'm going to change it back because the cinematography is amazing, the sound design is amazing, the score is amazing, and the acting is extremely good for this type of movie, and it's great.
I mean, the thing is like I was trying to be nitpicky last night when I watched it.
Yeah.
It had been years since I'd seen it, and I was like, yeah, maybe I just have like an inflated idea of this film because I watched it as a kid.
Yeah.
And I was thinking like maybe it's going to be a lot dumber. Watching it, I was like, this thing is pretty tightly constructed. Like it's like
it is. It's actually, structurally it's very good, and it has a theme. It has really good, comparisons and layers and everything to it. So the biggest problems I have with it are some of the unanswered questions. This is the other question I actually want to ask you.
Okay.
Does everybody have the same experience that Naomi Watts had, where they pull the thing out of their mouth, they pull out the fly from the TV, they have a horse jump off and see blood in the water? Like, what is everyone's experience with this?
Yeah, that's
this is very specific.
Because Noah doesn't seem to have as many things as she does.
No.
Noah believes in it because of all the photos that he takes of it. He and doing the research with her and realizing, oh, there's a real history to this. But Noah doesn't seem to be haunted by it in the same. But we could make the argument that because of the connection between Naomi Watts' son and Samara, that Naomi Watts is getting like a juiced up, extra haunted version of the 7-day experience.
Yeah.
And because the girl doesn't seem to be all that haunted by the last 7 days.
No, and the once she makes the copy, she's in the clear. She's free. So why does it keep happening to her? And the only reason that I came up with is like, well, she feels that Naomi Watts can actually release her from
and
prison of wherever.
And maybe it's that. Maybe it's literally Samara just leaving breadcrumbs because she sees that this woman is investigating.
Yeah,
and she sees that this woman is actually looking for her, and so she's pulling her along. Maybe it's just that. That's kind of
what I came to, but it also makes me wonder, like, well, all right, you get the call, you have 7 days. What happens after that? Besides your picture being taken and you can't see your face,
like for a lot of people, not a lot. It seems like they they watch a creepy tape, they get a creepy phone call, and then they just sort of go about their life for the next 7 days, and they kind of forget about it. And then on day 7, the TV turns on, and they go, "What the crap's going on?" And Samara comes out and kills you. And like,
could be.
And and the fact that Naomi Watts is having the experience she's having, that's why we're watching her movie and not anybody else. We're watching her, But I was, like I said, I was trying to be nitpicky with this screenplay and point at things that I had questions about Becca. I have questions about why the kid is eerie. Breaking it down with you and talking about it, I went, I think all of my problems are addressed. Even the things that I don't quite know, I'm okay not knowing them. And I think that the screenplay does enough that it gives me plausible, ways to interpret things that are really creepy.
Yeah.
And I just think that the thing is very well constructed, and I think it stays with you in a really effective way.
Yeah. So I think my other problem with it is this is being more nitpicky.
Mm-hmm.
The whole movie you're led to believe that the dad killed Samara.
Yeah.
And then it turns out that it's the mom.
Mm-hmm.
And the twist, that little twist of, oh, it was the mom that actually killed her, did not work for me because there's like no indication for it. And if they would have just kind of hinted at that throughout the whole movie, it probably would have been better. And that's my biggest nag that I have with the movie.
Yeah, maybe they could take some more time to try to set that up.
But it's honestly like, it's a little bit more nitpicky. So
Sure. The ending.
Yes.
I'm gonna give the ending of this film a 9.
I gave it the same score because it was so good.
Yeah.
That turn, man. Oh, it's one of the best payoffs in movie in our generation that I feel like.
Again, we our last 2 episodes have been all about payoff, have been about movies that really land. And
Very true.
like I said, you could end it with them releasing her from the well and everything's all good, but it's that twist that it's like, no, this was never about sending Samara off into the light and delivering her spirit into the afterlife. This was always about her being set loose so that she could even wreak even more havoc. And now you have the choice to make. Are you going to save your son or not? And that's the only thing you can do is save yourself. Oh boy. Great.
Yeah. It is a great, the turn, the setup. The ending is very, very well done. And I mean,
this kid creeps the bejesus out of me. Like this kid's the way he looks at his mom while his nose is bleeding. And
creepy kid. So really good ending for sure.
Rewatchability. I maybe this is low. I put it at 7 just because it's not. Yeah,
that's what I put too. I think this is and this, I kind of touched on this. Like, so many movies copied this that, like, now watching the original, even though this is the original, it was a little lessened for me. It's not as impactful, and I'm kind of like, but it still is very rewatchable. I really enjoyed it. Yeah, I picked up a lot more this time, but I mean, because it's so scary and because I don't enjoy watching it, I put it a little bit lower at 7.
I think that's right. I think I've never actually enjoyed watching this movie, but that's a testament to how good it is.
Yeah,
because it just leaves me going, I'm good if I don't see that for another few years.
Yeah, it's a Halloween movie. It's a scary movie.
It makes me feel haunted for a few days after I see it.
Yeah,
and that's how good it is at doing what it's trying to do. But it also makes me go, I'm not trying to watch that over and over and over again. But it definitely, like in this discussion too, all these years later, I'm getting more out of it. So it definitely gives more on rewatches. But I also am just like, boy, this movie really sticks with me in a way that not a lot of scary movies do.
Yeah.
So maybe I'd bump that up to like a 7.5. Cultural relevance. We talked about all the copycats this movie's had. Yeah. And I definitely think that it kicked off an era of horror cinema, an era in the genre. And I would say I put it like a 7.5, maybe even an 8 because of that. But
yeah, I gave it a 7 because I think it did kick off, it had a huge cultural impact. I think now, I mean, they made Rings. It didn't really make any sort of dent or splash. It didn't do much, but I still feel that this movie has lasting power. Like, it's one of those movies for a generation that really like The Exorcist. Like, it just scared all those people, and everybody from, our parents' generation remembers The Exorcist. Like, everyone from our generation remembers The Ring, and it will have this lasting impact. So I think 7. Yeah, I think it could probably be a little bit more, but it has an impact for sure.
I'm going to keep mine at 7.5. Yeah, I'm going to keep it right there. Subjective score. we've been saying a lot of positive things about this movie. I'm gonna keep mine's at a 7 just because, again, the movie's too good at what it does, which means I'm not like, it's not like a movie that I love, but I gotta give it props for being good at what it's trying to do. So I'm staying at 7 because I'm just like, you're too good at getting under my skin. And
and that's what I gave it a 7 as well. I think honestly, I mean, Gore Verbinski is he's a really talented director. I mean, and he's got a pretty wide range of movies that he can make. I mean, he made Mouse Hunt, which is very weird, and then he makes Pirates of the Caribbean, and he's a really good director. And I think the fact that he made this movie so well, I think it deserves a 7 in my opinion. So,
did you ever see A Cure for Wellness?
No, I didn't.
I never saw that either, and it looks
weird and scary.
The reason I never saw A Cure for Wellness is from the trailer, I felt like I'd seen it. I felt like it was like Shutter Island, like just like guy that is at an insane asylum, and they start making him feel like he's one of the patients, and they're telling him that he's always been one of the patients, and he's trying to convince them that he's not great. I don't know. I don't know what the movie actually is, but it just seemed like a movie when I saw the trailer that I was like, I think I've already seen that movie, but I'd be interested to check it out because I've actually heard some interesting things about it.
Yeah, I have not heard. That kind of came and went, but I agree. I saw the trailer and I was like, oh yeah, that seems like it might be this. But yeah, I wonder if that'll be more of a cult following, that gains for that, because But yeah, he's a good director. The Ring was good. It was a good movie.
All right, everybody, what do you think? Do you like The Ring? Do you think it's stupid? Do you think that we're little babies for letting it get under our skin? Did you watch The Ring 2 or Rings? Are you a fan of the Ring franchise, or is it just the first one? Do you like Ringu? Let us know.
And it was based on a book. So did any of you read the book? So
wow. But that's it. Go out there and wear a funny costume or a scary one and have a nice scary season for the rest of the month.
Yep.
And we'll see you on the next one, on the next episode. Thanks for hanging with us. Like, comment, share, subscribe, all those good things. Bye-bye.
7 days.
7 days.
We'll see you next time.
We'll see you in 7 days.